Hey, good morning, everyone. We'll go ahead and get started. So I'm Keith Cantrell. I work at the Cyber EW School along with my counterpart, Dr. Frank Lazara. We're going to talk to you today about the Total Army EW, counter-EW training and education strategy, along with a piece of that, which is the live virtual constructive training. So first thing we want to do is provide this overarching view that leads us to where we are at and where we're going. And so this chart will depict this urgent call for action of a pacing threat that we are going up against and the urgency of providing solutions along with the training piece, and part of that is the live virtual constructive training as we inform the EW Board of Directors, senior Army leaders, and Congress as well. But before we can do the live virtual constructive, there's certain aspects that had to come together, and most people in the room knows it's been a very long, tedious process in terms of pushing EW forward. So we wanted to look first at the threat and what our adversaries are doing with rapidly being able to change signals through software-defined radios, and the chess match that ensues with us countering that with our own quick dynamic spectrum development against those adversaries, along with material solution requirements and our personnel to join together in order to have an effective training strategy that lends itself to the live virtual constructive training. So a year ago, the G3 of the Army provided 3 priorities, and we kind of looked at it as a football analogy of we were at a flag football level. Not very good, not very competent in where we need to go. And so there was a design to get us to a high school, eventually college, and then ultimately at a professional level. So there was a 3-step process. One was to pivot from what we are currently doing and focusing on how units, soldiers see themselves through the electromagnetic spectrum. And then we wanted to pause what we are currently doing, which is a focus on electromagnetic attack, electromagnetic interference, until this training strategy and these ranges can be developed, which is what we're going to talk about today. And then we would proceed as program of records, make their way to camps, post installations. For example, currently right now we have TLS BCT Manpack, which is being fielded, and this will provide commanders the ability to go to a sister brigade, request their equipment to provide OP4 so that we can truly train the way we need to train, and that gets us to that high school level. So sometimes it's better just to have a picture than a bunch of bullet comments. This Total Army EW, counter-EW training and education strategy, TATES, starts out at 3 lines of effort. First being the institutional training, second being operational training, and the third line of effort, live virtual constructive training. So this first line of effort starts at the initial military training level. And so what we want to be able to do is see ourselves. So all soldiers would receive, electromagnetic interference, how to develop emissions control, how to, evasive movement and countermeasure techniques. So that's for all soldiers, an introduction to electromagnetic warfare. For the EW soldiers, they would continue that on with electromagnetic support to be able to see the enemy and to be able to protect the force. Overall, it would provide ability through the spectrum for commanders to see what the EMS is doing. Soldiers would then take that to their units and gain operational experience. And then through the PME process for advanced leaders, all soldiers or all leaders would receive basic fundamentals of what EW is, an EW 101 course, so that they can gain an understanding of what the EW capabilities are. For the EW soldiers themselves, they would gain a little bit more technical knowledge of electromagnetic capabilities, enemy electromagnetic order of battle, how to employ EW capabilities through an MDMP process to support a commander's scheme of maneuver. At the senior leader courses, we take it even a step further, where all leaders would gain a more refined or advanced theory of EW. And for our EW leaders, they would also gain joint capabilities that they can apply. All of that training would lend itself to line of effort 2, operational training, where those soldiers would go inform commanders through the MDMP process, the EW capabilities. All soldiers, all leaders would now have an understanding of EW capabilities, just like any of the other warfighting functions, and then be able to apply it into the targeting process for both lethal and non-lethal fires through sensing, through electromagnetic attack, or based on what the commander's attack guidance matrix, how they want to prosecute the target. All of that is included in the TATES. So to get to the live virtual constructive training, there was a piece that was missing that we have recently, in collaboration with ICO, developed an MDO range guide, but more, it is a checklist that would be applied to TC 25-8 as either an appendix or an annex that would give a step-by-step process for what a unit would need to do to occupy a range that would be operating in the EMS. And so we took the steps at the joint level with the anticipation that a installation spectrum manager would provide the clearance through the appropriate clearance levels for a year. Eliminating units having to go through that process themselves, it would be the spectrum manager. And then 90 days out from the time that that year clearance was granted, they would go through the recycle or request approval again, so that there's no break in training. So that helps those units to not have to worry about it. There may be some units that already have the process down, and that's fine, but this is an enterprising, overarching, that any unit can take that range guide and go through the process to request so that they can use the spectrum, in particular electromagnetic attack. With that, I will turn it over to Frank.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Dr. Lazar. I work for Mr. Boudreaux and Dr. Scott at the Cyber School. As Keith alluded to, this training range, the Davis range that we're constructing down here at Gordon, is a product to hopefully fill this solution for the overall strategy. In order for that to happen, we needed to try to work in the live virtual constructive modalities to the range. It's common for 27, 28 right now, but we're not waiting for that to happen. We're already conducting some coursework down there. We're also TA 42 down there. We're already putting up some additional buildings, so we get our soldiers out of. Those of you familiar with Eisenhower know about Willard Training Range. It's too close to Augusta, too close to the hospital for us to really be able to practice true EW types of objectives and TTPs. We need a larger space. And like Keith was talking about, the range guide will allow a unit to take those annexes and continue to get the authorities over a longer term set for their planning, and then go forward with the ranges. As a matter of fact, that project that we're doing for more, they're already working on emitters out there based on some of the guidance we've given them on some things. But as you take a look at this range layout, you'll see that some particular areas for the live virtual constructive training, we have our range operations control area where there's going to be some live virtual and constructive training going on, not only there as a control facility, but it's going to have a classroom in there also, complete with SIPR and the ability for us to bring in some cyber effects through the range if we have that opportunity. So it won't be totally limited to EW, but that's the focus right now. In addition to that, it will control, as you can see here, an initial primary town. this primary town as a solution is to be able to have multiple types of buildings that have different types of facades. So there'd be absorptive, reflective, and refractive elements on there. Some concrete, some glass, some wood, because the EW soldier in the urban environment or coming out of a dense forest is going to have to adapt based on what the threat is, as we all know. So this is the scenarios that we're trying to give them as we go forward with this training range. The plans are to expand this as we get there to follow on with lane training, as you can probably see up here, 6-lane training, culminating events, all to meet the live, virtual, and constructive training that we're monitoring and going to be having the soldiers do. That's our Echoes and our 170 Bravos and 17 Bravos. But if you also take a look, follow on, we have our airstrip down there that we're looking at later on, possibly having some UAV training as we continue with drones. And we're doing some drone stuff right now, but it's real limited. But again, what he was talking about, the MSOs have to approve all of these types of action. The range guide really helps us set forward what we have to do with not only our training range, the Davis range, but also for the other home station training ranges. When you get a lieutenant's been given the assignment, hey, go run this range, and oh yeah, we want to do some EW effects on it. Well, we've given them a checklist for what they can do with that. But this is hopefully our solution, at least for here at the institution. So this is just one of the solutions, but it addresses one of the factors that we needed for the overall total strategy. Suits, the cyber electromagnetic warfare training strategy. We've been developing it for a few years here, but we finally got it to push across, we think, the initial, I'd say probably 10-yard line. Ready, I've got a great team here helping me put this together, and what it's concentrating in 3 main areas, as you can see here, to help address the total strategy. But to do that, we have to see where we as a schoolhouse have our institutional requirements to make sure our 17 Echoes and Bravos and our Alphas are all trained based on the particular skill set that they need. Of course, us being an outcomes-based school, we're trying to make it equipment agnostic for the soldiers to have the ability to go out and do their job. But for them to take a look at, right here, our focus is to address their technical and theoretical types of training here in the institution. But as you see the continuum of operations, how are we going to address that as it moves forward? So we have to make sure that we're sending out the soldiers with the correct training out to home station training and making sure that on the force that they are also reinforcing what we've been putting out at the schoolhouse, and yet very key, constant communication back to us so we can continue to revise that. CTSSBs, post-deployment collection visits with call, and here at the CCOE we have a great lessons learned section that we're constantly talking to those EW soldiers and some cyber soldiers when they go out for their particular warfighters or their particular NTC or CTC rotations to give us what are we doing right, what are we doing wrong, what do we need to improve. And that's how we're getting that constant feedback, because as any of you that had to deal with TRADOC, it takes forever to get something in a lesson plan, but it allows for concrete experiences every single day. And we got a great cadre that's doing that. So what we're doing is we're keeping this feedback loop from home station training. So if we're in the right modality moving forward across and looking at home station training, is that going to support what has to happen out in the force? Again, taking all of those results and the feedback mechanism there for us to be able to continually tweak and continually to improve. As you can see across my bottom here, it's out for cyber school review right now. It's going to be CCOE by the end of the month, end of next month. September. We're close. And then expecting worldwide staffing out in November. Hopefully publication of the technical circulars. Similar structure as normal technical circulars. We're going to address it. I'll address it here in a second, but that's where we're hoping to get that out to worldwide staffing, and they're going to continue for improvement as we move forward. Here's the body of the strategy, based off of the overall introductory focus. Up here, overall introductory focus is along those 3 continuums you saw. the institutional areas that we have here, the courses, our outcomes based on the Army learning model and how we're instructing here at the cyber school. And then it goes to, we identified the home station training areas that we need. I'll talk about that in a second. But then, of course, that all supports not only TASITs and the overall strategy, but how we are required to integrate with the total force and how we're doing that a little bit ahead of time as we go forward with suits. We perceive it's going to be a great document. We're going to get a lot of good feedback on it. We've had some great support throughout the force already, and we continue to support that. Your big ones are right here. Part of that home station training that we're trying to show in a TC type of environment is what are those cyber soldiers needing at home station training, and what are our EW soldiers needing at the home station training that we want to describe to the commander, here's what we think that you need to have. Now, they're going to get a chance to chop on this, but we all know commanders have approval authority on their medals, and they can approve and disapprove. So what we're hoping to do is show them, as a schoolhouse, we're trying to describe and codify what we think are the base elements you need to be looking at. And then you can help us add to that based on your medals. And as I was looking at some of these in one of the projects, some of them were addressing a particular lesson plan, and I'll be honest with you, it was just blank for one of the other branches. And that's not on their fault. They just didn't know. And now we've created a synergy from the schoolhouse to try to push that forward. Now, you attack this, those of you, I'm an old tanker. So when we look at things, in my mind, and the rest of the Army does too, sort of a gunnery table type of format. So that's what we've done to replicate that, because we want to make sure that the force sees us as a synergistic combat multiplier. So these are just samples. As you can see up at the top, we have different tables based on individual teams and platoons. For this, I just chopped these out so you can get an idea of what it's going to be like. But we looked at different echelons from division on down for both cyber and for EW types of training. So as they look at particular areas that they need to look at based on those individual tasks, again, tasks that we see them having to go out there and do. This gives the commander the opportunity to train and certify his individuals. They might not all have, as we all know, different medals don't require you to have everything based on the mission set. So that we're trying to describe, not prescribe to them. Okay? So the next level down from that is how are we making that happen in the meantime. We can't just wait for a strategy to be approved. We can't just wait for the total strategy to give us that umbrella, but how are we doing that on a day-by-day? Well, at the tactical, I like to refer to it as a tactical level. In 22, we started an initiative with one of the centers of excellence to try to get EW and some cyber training out to the other branches. We started at the infantry school and armor school down at Maneuver Center, working in partnership with them. Initially, they were looking at, well, we need to take a look at captain's career course only and how they deal with the SEMA teams in a division or brigade. But once they really we did an initial class, they saw we needed more. Not only did they need more, they wanted more. So what we did was we started a team with an interaction between both of them, both branches, and we got down there and they wanted the Rangers involved in this, the Airborne Ranger Training Brigade. So then the priorities shifted a little bit, but the bottom line is an individual comes to Ranger School, they get graded on their comms and EW and MCOM and EP. Now they really get an idea. Somebody's going to be over there DFing them, and I've been working with their op for the equipment for them to show them what they're going to, if they're not adhering to their base protection and skill sets, they're going to have a little bit more stress put on them by the instructors, those of you that went to Ranger School. So what does that do? As you can see on the left side, here's what we think that they need to have in order for us to be able to work with them. What I call the critical success factor, academics. In other words, where they're in their foundations, the practical applications, what they need inside their take their doctrine, your lessons that you already have, how are you already addressing electromagnetic protection or support without even thinking about it? And they were. When I found out that the infantry and armor school both were, and we also had them for train to trainer, I'll tell you about in a second. They were already doing some of that, but they didn't really understand the synergy behind it. Do they really understand what we have the capability for giving them for EW products, heat maps, and how we can sense them when they're in their battle position or out on the maneuver space? How we can get them GTAs, some things, some base items that they can get out there. We're not trying to turn the other branches into EW soldiers. We're trying to show them that we are augmented, combined arm combat multiplier. Personnel, train the trainer. We're a small branch, as you've all heard this week and probably know. We don't have quite the force that we need to have. We're getting there. But to train the trainer, we've had them come up and sit through our classes. Let them understand what we're teaching, what we're telling our lieutenants and our warrants and our Charlies and Echoes, our enlisted soldiers. How are you going to be able to make a difference on the battlefield when you're out there on the battle space? Otherwise, they're just going to put you to the side, not use you, and utilize you. So that's not what we want to have happen. So we had them come up, continuing with us, and we're also trying to get them individuals allocated. We've got 3 individuals already allocated down and assigned to the maneuver center. We got some out at Fire Center now. We're trying to get work with those centers to try to get 17 series to help us continue with this message as we go forward. So that's now. All that does is just provide the additional link back here. Additional military training, as we all know, BOLIX, NCO academies, and some other training, but also with the captain's career course. So when we got down there and they saw the equipment and the training that we were doing, showed them how they reacted in the EMS, it's almost a life-changing hit upside the head to them. Okay, they really love it. They're asking for it. We already got the maneuver centers got 2 of the beasts they funded. They came up with their own money, and it's not cheap. And we've seen all the other equipment we've shown them that we possibly for them to use. They're really looking at this. Ranger School is doing the same thing. Armor School. I went down there with my team, and we made an M1A1, a directional antenna. The whole thing, masking the friendly side. Just showing them some simple TTPs that we at the cyber school can show them how they can survive better on the battle space. And we're hoping to expand that as we go forward. CASCOM's looking at embarkation, debarkation ports, what they have to do before they go to load the ships and what they're going to do when they get in theater. They're looking at a lot of, so as this expands from CASCOM, Fire Center, we just spent a time out at maneuver support for protection, MP, engineer, and chemical. All of them they're ramping on and wanting to know how can EW help us be better and help us in the battle space. So this is just a sample timeline, as you can see here, as I look at and I sit down with their instructional designers. Those of you that are civilians and those of you that are green suiters know that if you don't have your training developers in your back pocket, training doesn't happen. So all those great people in those other branches, we get them woven into this and let them have the responsibility, and they have the buy-in for the do-outs here. Tell us some of your processes. What do you think about if we give you this kind of equipment, what you can do, how you can change or augment your instructor training? Maneuver Captain's Career Course changed an integration point for 16 places in their curriculum. They're already implementing that in their captain's career. Their doctrine updates. That's where we owe our doctrine to them and their doctrine back. So it's a real synergistic type of effort to help support back to the TASIS. And it'll help with suits when they look and see what the particular EW soldiers need to be doing. You can see here some of the other centers. That's, we believe, wraps up what we need to talk about, but I want you to leave with the fact that the overall training strategy is just the beginning as an umbrella, but we have to make sure that we're putting something on the ground with the live virtual constructive training range here. The range guide will help us get those same techniques out to a particular MDO range, whether you're at Cavazos or you're at Riley or you're at Carson or wherever. If you want to produce EMS effects, you need to understand it's not something, I can just go show up and draw my ammo and go out to this range. I want to having an emitter out there. No, you got to get a lot of clearances, like Keith was talking about. You got to work closely with your spectrum manager. There's a lot more to it. Having been a young range officer a long time ago, using muskets, you had to clear a lot of stuff. But that's what we're hoping to show them in suits and show them in TASITs, and we are able to bring them in with the range. Now, with our MDO range here, the Davis range, we've got to continue to go forward with equipment. It's always updating. As we all know, it's hard to have particularly EW equipment, and we have some cyber equipment, but we're going to be able to produce effects. But there are things we need to expand as that continues to move forward. We think at the strategic level, we're hitting the mark. We believe suits is going to help codify and let those commanders address the areas they need for certification and training at the home station and ready for war fighters. Let us do our job, but we can't do our job unless they're giving us the feedback. And then third, how we get them out to the force and how we can train them at all echelons. That pretty much concludes what I believe we need to say. Any quick questions? If you do, I have a microphone here. Yes, sir, if you would. Okay. My quick answer would be, were you talking to General Buzzard, who just left the maneuver center? Because that's almost exactly what he wanted to know. How can we keep from being risk avoidance of not even understanding and then implementing the use of our cyber and EW soldiers? We think we've tackled that a little bit with the partnership to show them what we can do, bringing their instructors up here. Each TRADOC school has a responsibility for certain courses. Fires, we get stuff from fires. We get stuff from infantry school. We have to give them things from cyber and EW. That's in the base training at IMT and for captain. We're working on the captain's career lesson. So we have a partnership for that. We have to give them. So far, I've seen that exact thing. The risk, not as much, not that they don't want it, the risk aversion. When we show them that when they put these EW teams that are going to be in their battle space, how they can not only use them in a defensive posture, but use them in their training, home station training. Let them go out there and turn around and show and DF them and show them how you look in the battle space. Help them force you to practice better MCOM. So by showing them that, it's the crawl, walk, run method, of course. I think we've got them in the crawl right now for them to all want to see that. Risk aversion is definitely something that I don't think we need to fight. I think we have to try to take advantage of that and seeing that because it's a training opportunity for us. Did that help? Go ahead, sir. You can borrow the mic if you want, sir. Okay.
So great question. And you heard earlier where he was talking about that pause pivot, right? And that didn't go over well at first. And so what we were seeing was the Army was indiscriminately buying things to put out at some ranges, but not all ranges, to interfere with their communications. And I think it was teaching some bad practices, and it was not being looked at holistically. It was focusing on EMI, and that was the pause pivot, right? And so kind of the mantra was, I want to get further left in that targeting cycle, because if you're reacting to adversary EA, then they've sensed you, they've located you, they've identified you, they targeted you, and they just chose to irradiate you. They could have just as easily chosen to eradicate you, right? And so that was kind of a message that was floating out there, and then Ukraine happened. And all eyes are on Ukraine. And there's plenty of open source, so I won't get anything classified here. But basically the mantra we've been talking about is 8 minutes. 8 minutes. And any folks that remember the 70s and 80s, and even early 90s, I mean, that's what we were faced with. We went through like 2 decades of whatever omnidirectional, full power, no one in the space was our adversary. Well, actually, we were, right? We were fratricide ourselves, or we would turn on the jammers and jam everything as we go out, right? And so we were learning some bad lessons. But what we learned from Ukraine is 8 minutes from when you break squelch or there's a pulse of a radar, you find out, is your emissions control better than the adversary's electromagnetic warfare, their sensing and their fires chain? And so now we had everyone's attention. And so now as we look, we can't get this out fast enough. So the work that's going to be done here at Fort Eisenhower is going to inform how the Army then sets up similar EMS capabilities across ranges at all of the other post camp and stations. There's some great things that are happening, like way out west in really open EMS permissive environments. That's number one, it's not the battlefield that we're looking at for LISCO, it's not undulating terrain, all of that. But also, you can't take what they're doing there and use that across the Army's post camps and stations, because most of them are EMS non-permissive. And so when we learn how to use RF absorption material, how we learn, just like you would do with a small arms range, if you've got an elevation, what you're not normally doing is shooting down the elevation. You're using that elevation to your benefit as a backstop to your range. And so similarly here, how do we establish the ranges so that we're shooting EMS as our jammers into natural absorption material with other backscatter? And so the things we learn here will happen other places. Fort Moore jumped all over that. And so not exactly how it went down, but to get an idea, there was a toot going on with the Captain's Career Course. There was some BOLIC students doing cover and concealment, and we had some EW professionals out there, and they were looking and saying, your lieutenants are doing great. We can't see them. Click. Well, there's one there, there's two there, and we showed them how you can absolutely see them. And so now it's becoming a reality. So great question. I think commanders are past the 20 years of I need, exact location to, hey, if it's shooting at me, it's a bad guy in LISCO. I don't have to know who it is. I just need to know the grid coordinates to stop it. Great question, though. Thanks.
Yes, sir. How we approach that alignment of the joint MCOM in particular. When I was out at the Maneuver Support Center talking to the protection folks, they're the ownership for ABCANTS, the ABCANTS effort for the multinational effort, and they want us right in the middle of that with them so we can help standardize some of that as we continue to move this forward, and at least from the Army and for our other sister services. And they have other sister services that are participating in that. So we're now getting involved in a lot of that to help standardize a lot of that, because I think if they can do that, it will wind up making it easier in a joint effort. Yes, sir. I'd be interested in getting any of your feedback on that.
Yeah, this is a group effort. So exactly what Frank said, like those tech circulars when they go out for staffing, hammer them, right? And when they come back out again, hammer them again. And as we're putting the equipment that Keith had talked about in the hands of soldiers, that's when we're really going to learn how to do things, right? Right now, we're hearkening back to the 70s, 80s, and 90s, but taking a 21st century look at it. Guaranteed, when we hand this stuff off to those soldiers in the field, they're going to innovate, and we want to capture that into doctrine. To kind of capture also at what level this is at the Chief of Staff of the Army's level. This is at the unders level. So General George has authored a number of articles on electromagnetic warfare and electromagnetic spectrum operations. General Matlock, the G3 of the Army, has said several times that the Vice Chief Staff of the Army is growing more frustrated with going to joint sessions with a square Army block when all the other services are coming with their round service block for a round service whole, right? Round joint whole. And so in order to get after that, we're standing up either an EW or Electromagnetic Spectrum Operations Board of Directors. So there's a board of directors being pulled together to make sure that we have a continuity between the ingenuity that's happening at a very rapid pace at this level, and then how do we codify it and then connect into the joint environment. And so I think some of those things will help out. And then again, the core SEMA chiefs that are out there and the division SEMA chiefs that are out there that have areas of operation that touch NATO or Pacific nations, you're right, we're not going at this all by ourselves. And it's ridiculous to think that we are. And if you look at a Pacific situation, we have joint partners of other nations that are already doing things in the electromagnetic spectrum. And so as we bring our equipment, so we mentioned Manpack as a mounted system and the echelons above core systems come out. One of the big things that we're doing is data standards that not only can we use with all of our systems to include the IC and Mission Command, but the other services and a joint capability so that we can share sensed data, right? Not classified, not unclassified, not classified, open in the air. How do we get that data shared across the battlefield at the speed of battle? And so, yes, we'll take all the inputs to make sure that we're resonating with all the folks across the field.
Thank you. Any more questions on either of the levels? Yes, sir.
Not yet. We are just moving to the phase with PCTE, or the Persistent Cyber Training Environment, on our cyber side to start migrating content that we train in our own virtual environment over to the persistent cyber training environment. Another step will be, as we build this range out, initially it'll be a closed range for close action capabilities, and then some special EW capabilities with hooks. We'll make it, once we have sets and reps, we'll make it available to connect to, but that's a PCTE decision. We just want to make the capability available. Great question.
Yes, sir. The range itself will have, like I mentioned before, have fiber SIPR, 3 networks going on. So we're going to be able to continue to evolve that as we move forward. Any other questions? Yes, sir. If you,
Yeah. So great question. The answer is no, and I give it with a little bit of pause, but that hasn't stopped us from doing it. When we stood up the school, we knew that this is a volatile environment where a task condition standard way of training is not going to work. task condition standard works really well when the tasks are very objective, the conditions are very few and normative, and then the standards are easily observable. Like in none of your business, when I went to basic training, they taught us, right, if our assigned weapon jammed, we did this thing called sports, right? And if you grab a private that just graduated from basic training, guess what they teach that private at basic training here a couple of decades later? Sports, right? But that's not the environment that we're in within both the cyber and the electromagnetic warfare aspect. So instead of doing task-based training, we're doing topics-based training. And so it's more, as you see that arrow going across, we have a significant amount of fundamental theory. Again, what I learned when I went through, when I came to then Fort Gordon, we learned, superheterodyne and how you modulate, modulation, all of that. What we got caught up in the last 20 years, I think, was the rapid acquisition and fielding of equipment. It kind of pushed all the theory out because we had a mindset that we needed to teach, like that 25 uniform, every one of the radio sets he or she may see, and so it was a bunch of buttonology. And normally, we would get a call back from the field, and they would say, hey, we got this new private in, and they don't know this radio XYZ, why aren't you training that? We looked into POI, and it was one of the 20 that was trained. It was one of the last 5, but when you're in a learning environment that way, you learn to be able to get the buttons and knobs for the test, and as soon as the test is done, you flush it and you move to the rest. That's not what we wanted. So instead, we instill a lot of theory, and then we go to a technical competency. How do you apply, this one in particular is for EW, application of force in the electromagnetic spectrum. So now you understand RF radio wave propagation, modulation schema, all of that. How do you now apply force? This is where, as we get program of record equipment, they will use that equipment in order to understand how they're applying that, but we won't focus on the equipment. And then they'll find that equipment as they go out to the range again, as they learn how to get hide sites and how to find lines of effort and lines of bearing and so forth, but we're not focusing on the equipment. So when they get to their first duty assignment, they'll likely find that's the equipment they use, and they're very familiar with it. But if the Army rapidly brings in a new piece of equipment, just the GUI has changed. Basically, the theory of operation underneath has right? We can rapidly, because we're doing tasks, find a line of bearing, not a task condition standard. Underneath, our lessons plans rapidly evolve. That's where you see that courseware as code. That's an example. How many cyber folks do I have in here? Any cyber folks? All right. How many folks know what Git is? Okay, so it's a distributed platform where software developers drop their code, and you can dynamically have individuals look at that code and make recommendations, and the owner or the rigorous approval above that can look and see what changes were recommended, how if they implemented it, it would impact it, and then they can commit it, and when they commit it, that's the new version. That's how we train a lot of our technical training in the cyber school. That training, those lessons plans, are available for individuals in the operational force to then dial back in, so we kind of co-opt the operational force to help maintain our lessons plans, and when our senior instructor looks at it and says, okay, my instructors know that, they can teach that, and commits that, immediately that lesson plan is the only lesson plan, because unlike Word documents where you can get others or PowerPoint slides, they're pulling from that Git repository every time they train. And so that same methodology of being able to do that. Now, I said no, because we were approved at a schoolhouse to do outcomes-based training, but when we get inspected for our accreditation, which is happening this next year, the inspection sheet is for topics-based training, and so, task-based training. And so when they come and inspect us and they say, your students just took this exam, are the tasks that were part of that exam entered into, is it DTMS? Well, we don't do tasks. And so they'll look at it and we'll say, well, we're doing topics, not tasks. And they'll say, okay, no, don't gig us on it. There's not an NA. So they haven't quite moved there, and we take the hits, but we're kind of leading up. We're going to give them a methodology where they can do that. So I think that's where TRADOC is understanding we need to get into a faster model, as well as just because I can change a curriculum, this is one of my big issues. So any industry folks, I'm looking for other ways to be able to maintain at that home station training, because we get a private that comes here and they go through exquisite training, may have just been updated, and then they go to the operational force and we don't see them again for another 5 or 6 years, and when we see them for about 2 or 3 months. So how are we keeping the rest of the force informed on all those capability drops that the Army's doing across the Army, in case that soldier moves to a unit that got NEF training 5 months ago and they've never seen that? And so those are some other things we're looking for platform at home station. But great question.
I listened to him a week and a half ago out at Leonardwood, and he said exactly this. He understands there's a bog there, right? That's why I said those of you who've been in TRADOC understand how long it takes. That's why I also mentioned when we're looking at down at the school at the COE level, I mentioned those valuable people called instructional designers. Those are the people that you need to have in your, like I said, in your back pocket. They understand the training and the approval cycle. But there's also, if the lesson plan is built the right way, you can change a lot of your resources and a lot of the concrete experiences until you get that chance for that update. Got a lot of north-south from a lot of generals in briefing what we've been doing here about muscle memory. We have to make their ability to react to EP or EA in their particular areas and based on MCOM as a muscle memory type of task for them in their branches. Not what we're trying to teach them how to operate a Beast Plus or any of the other equipment, but how we can help them get through that. So when they see that, you tell me, oh, I'm getting an electronic attack. No, you're not. Some kind of interference. Guess what? They already have a training plan in their IMT and PME lessons that talk about that. They happen to be blank, but that's what our job is, to help them get through that. The crews that I brought up here, every day I do a hot wash. I say, you tell me where you think we need to integrate this based on what you've seen that we can do. And they came up with a myriad of particular areas and tasks and the particular lessons that they're teaching at the Bolix alone, and then at the NCO academies down there. So they're really, the other branches are taking this and they're really trying to expand that, how we can add to that, because they know, those of us in TRADOC, it takes a while to get it implemented, but we know how we can skin that cat and get around it. Great question. Thank you, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Like I quickly mentioned, right, I quickly mentioned the protection out at Maneuver Support wants us involved in AB camps. That's just part of the small stuff.
Yeah, so specifically our courses and the ability for our foreign partners to attend. So we had to, it's almost like when you're in the plane and the stewardess says, hey, you know, if those oxygen masks come down, put them on yourself first and then take care of others, right? So we kind of had to do that. I'm not saying that we're all oxygenated and we're good. We're still struggling through exactly a 10-year-old. I've got a 6-year-old granddaughter, and she's got a long way to go before she's an adult. We have a long way to go. But what we have been doing is making foreign partners aware that there is a foreign military sales methodology to then ask for our training. So we have a cyber operations planner course. It's a course specifically built for a work role within the cyber mission force. We built it, and it really rings all bells when it's being conducted with U.S. service members, and they can reach across to over to our cyber and find out, is there a mission in the future that we can use that to provide some planning products as we conduct our course. And so the course, as they're learning about the cyber operational force, how to do planning, and then the products that they would have to do as a planner, they're doing those products, and then we get somebody from JFHQ Cyber that comes back, and the class briefs them on those products. So that's and many of them are adopted, or hey, it's a good 80%, we'll take it from here. And so learn by doing. That's excellent. The next step, we did a Five Eyes course. Very similar, because our Five Eyes partners at certain levels, we have releasable information. The next step then was we did a foreign partners course at no classification, where we used an open source example of a mission to be able to plan that out. That's a methodology that we're looking at some of our other courses. So we have a Cyber Common Technical Core 9-week course on intermediate operating systems, security, and networking. What they're actually doing, and I think General Kraft talked about it, what they're actually doing in the network is not classified. It's techniques and procedures that most advanced cybersecurity personnel and hunters use anyway. It's the conversations that happen in the SCIF, why you're doing that, how that vulnerability was found, how that vulnerability was exploited. That's the information that makes it classified. So we're working with foreign mission partners to request through foreign mission sales for us to recreate that using an unclassified, same type situation, so that they learn by doing as well. We're looking at our 17 Delta, our developer course, no classified information in that at all. So that's available for our foreign partners to, again, go through the FMS request to then have seats and quotas built in, and we're more than happy to have them in our courses. Yes, yep. If you can go to the one on Davis Range, I want to take. How many industry folks are here? Okay, a good number. Okay, so some practical stuff, right, that you might be able to take. So what's shown on here is an entire range kind of complex that was devised using a combat, what do they call it? CACTIF, but combined combat training, combined arms facility. So CACTIF. Anyway, it was costed out at over $90 million. The Army doesn't have $90 million wedges in ranges, right? And it was built out to be able to take the total capacity that our EW part of our school is growing out to, as well as future capabilities like launched effects that are going to use UAS capabilities. And so that's why you see the UAS part on there, right? So kind of future. So the CAC commander, I can't remember if it was General Beagle, I think it was General Rainey when he was CAC commander, said, that's awesome, that's great, I see you, visioning where you're going to be in the future, now get me down below $30 million. So what we focused on was, it doesn't have to be a full CACTIF. I don't need every building that has HVAC, and some buildings need to be full HVAC because we're going to put equipment in there, but others I just need a building shell or a facade, depending on how we're doing our training. So we got it down a lot less to like 70 million. And then we focused at, what do we need like right now? And right now we need the Range Operations Center, so that ROCA and control area, which also has some sticks lanes, has a classroom, and then at least one main village. We can't go with the UAS yet because we don't have launched effects, so we can say so we didn't break the project up. Instead, what we looked at is, what can we justify based on what we're getting in the force here within the next 4 to 5 years? And so We got that down below $30 million, and it currently sits in Palm 29 in its TRADOC's #1 range program, who is trying to move it to the left. Now, why does that interest industry? 2 reasons. If you're doing construction and things like that, we got to build some stuff out here, right? But that $30 million, below $30 million project has not one emitter, not one sensor, not one instrument. That is just here. Now you have the facility, the infrastructure in buildings and your unapproved trails, but not one piece of actual gear. And so we're building out what our mission unique equipment needs to look like so that we can have the appropriate emitters, transceivers, so we can get, battle damage assessment, and how do we instrument the range. And we're looking at that preferably not in like one huge package, but something that we can implement. As Frank said, we're already pushing people there. Willard Training Range is about 2 acres. That's about 650 acres. Willard Training Range, you've got like DDMAC. How many folks use DDMAC? There's a lot of wireless medical devices there. You don't want a private saying, oops, I just irradiated towards DDMAC, right, at the wrong time. And so we're already moving stuff out, ad hoc, out to that 650 acres. We got a $2 million push through DAMO-TR this year, so we're building some hard stands in areas that aren't part of Davis Range, and then we're buying other emitters and sensors and capabilities. And so we're going to go out and be asking some RFIs pretty soon. What should that look like? How do we instrument it? How do we get it set up for our soldiers to be able to do what they need to do? And then finally, as it grows out to the bigger, any folks from the 11th here? So we have the 11th Cyber Battalion right here on Fort Eisenhower that have EW capabilities. And other than going out in the backyard and doing a couple of button switches and turn some things on to make sure it works, they normally go out to Muscatatuck. Anyone know where Muscatatuck is? Yeah, it's a long way to go, right? To go from your crawl in the backyard of the 11th to walking and running. We like to give them some walk space, so they'll be able to do some training here as well, and then we'll interleave into that. Fort Campbell's not that far away. Other local organizations can come into the EMS environment that we have to run their troops through. So industry, be thinking of that, because we will be looking to industry for how we set up that environment to include how we're instrumenting it. I know we're at time, and so we have 2 minutes. Just like to close.
Yeah, any final comments, questions? Yes, sir.
Yeah, great question. So we'll be working with PEO Stry. Because PEO Stry, they own those things. That was another when we were putting some stuff out there all over to do some ad hoc stuff. PEO Stry said, hey, it's kind of our job. That's why you're not doing it very well. And so look to PEO Stry. Good question.
Thank you, sir. Keith and I will be up here if anybody has anything you want to talk to us. I know you got to get to your next session. I want to thank you for being here today. Consider what we've been showing to you. The slides should be out on the AFCEA site. So thanks for coming. Keith, anything? All right. Thank you, everyone.